It all started when I collapsed at work. One minute, I was sitting in my cubicle, answering emails, preparing for the afternoon meeting, and the next, everything went black. I remember hearing voices, feeling hands on my shoulders, and then waking up in the ER, cold and disoriented. The doctors told me it was a panic attack, but I knew it was more than that. The weight of everything, the endless pressure at work, the constant balancing act at home, trying to keep my daughter Ellie safe, happy, and healthy, while my own world felt like it was coming apart, had finally taken its toll. I wasn't just physically exhausted, I was emotionally drained. I had been putting everyone else's needs ahead of my own for so long that I couldn't even remember what it felt like to take care of myself. The last few months had been particularly overwhelming, and now it was all catching up with me. My thoughts were a jumbled mess as I lay there on the hospital bed, my mind running through everything I had been avoiding. The bills I hadn't paid, the work deadlines I couldn't meet, the looming dread of everything I hadn't been able to fix. Ellie, my 5-year-old, was sitting quietly by my side, her small hand gripping the sleeve of my hospital gown. Her wide eyes were watching me, trying to understand what was happening, but I could see the fear in her face. She knew something was wrong. I could tell she was trying to be brave for me, but her little body was trembling. I wanted to reassure her, to tell her that everything would be okay, but I wasn't sure anymore. I wasn't sure of anything. A nurse walked in, her voice gentle but firm as she asked, "Do you have anyone who can come take your daughter? She can't stay here." I looked down at Ellie, my heart aching. She had been with me through so much already, and I couldn't bear the thought of her being alone. But I didn't have any choice. I pulled my phone out of my bag and tried to call my sister. I knew she was always busy with her own life, but I had no one else to turn to. "I'll call my sister," I said, trying to sound normal, even though my insides were twisting with anxiety. The nurse left to make the call, and I held Ellie's hand, offering her a smile I didn't feel. "Are we going home soon?" she whispered, her voice small and uncertain. "Soon," I said, my voice catching in my throat. It was a lie. I didn't know when we would be going home, or if we would at all. My sister didn't pick up right away. I glanced at the clock, counting the minutes in my head, each second feeling like an eternity. Ellie asked the same question over and over, and I answered with the same empty reassurance, trying to hold it all together. When my sister finally arrived, she breezed into the room, her heels clicking on the tile floor like she was on a runway. "What happened?" she asked, her voice smooth, almost detached, as if she were asking about the weather. The concern didn't reach her eyes. I felt a wave of frustration wash over me. This wasn't just some inconvenience. This was my life falling apart, and my sister was acting like she was doing me a favor by showing up. "I don't know if they're keeping me. I need you to take Ellie," I said, my voice shaking despite myself. Ellie looked up at her aunt, her small face hopeful, but my sister barely acknowledged her. She just gave a dismissive wave and sighed. "Ellie's a handful, you know that," she said, her tone light, almost playful. But it wasn't playful to Ellie. It was a dismissal, a rejection. Ellie froze. Her little body stiffened and her face fell. It was like watching the light go out of her eyes. I felt something break inside me, not rage, but something much sharper. Disappointment, disbelief, and an overwhelming sadness. How could she say that in front of her? How could she treat Ellie like that? The room seemed to shrink around me as I watched my sister's careless words land on Ellie like a weight she couldn't carry. I watched Ellie, my little girl, as her small body went rigid, her shoulders slumping in defeat. Her eyes, usually so full of light, now seemed empty. She didn't cry, but the hurt in her expression was clear. It was like her whole world had shifted in that moment, like she was realizing something about her family that I had been blind to for far too long. I tried to hold it together, but my voice cracked as I spoke. "Don't say that in front of her," I said, my words trembling with the weight of the truth I had been avoiding for years. "Please, just take her. She needs someone familiar right now." But my sister didn't seem to hear me. Her expression barely changed as she glanced at Ellie and then back at me, like this was just another minor inconvenience in her day. "I can't just drop everything," she said, as if it was my fault she had a busy life. "We've got plans." The words hung in the air, cold and dismissive. Her gaze flitted to her watch as though the minutes of her life were more important than the needs of her niece. The frustration that had been bubbling inside me exploded. "What do you mean you can't?" I asked, my voice rising despite myself. "I'm in the emergency room. My daughter needs you." Her face tightened for a second, but instead of apologizing or showing any concern, she simply sighed. "We're going to be late," she said, her words flat, as if it were just another errand on her list to check off. "I don't have time for this right now." The sheer audacity of her words left me speechless. I could feel my heart breaking all over again. Not because of what she was saying, but because of the way Ellie was absorbing it. She was just a child. My child. And my sister was treating her like a burden. The room felt colder, smaller, as the silence stretched between us. I tried to keep it together for Ellie, but my thoughts were spiraling. How could my own sister be so callous? How could she refuse to take care of the little girl who looked up to her, who loved her so deeply? I glanced over at Ellie. She hadn't moved, her face frozen in that same distant expression. She was no longer even looking at her aunt. She was looking at me, silently pleading for an explanation I couldn't give. My heart ached for her, and I knew, deep down, that this was just one more crack in the facade I had been holding up for so long. I had made excuses for my family's behavior for years, telling myself it wasn't that bad, that they cared in their own way. But this was different. This was something I couldn't ignore. My sister didn't even wait for me to say anything else. She just turned and left, her footsteps echoing in the hallway as she disappeared around the corner. I was left alone in the sterile white room with my daughter, her small fingers still clutching mine. "Mom, are we going home soon?" Ellie whispered again, her voice so small, so fragile. My stomach twisted as I fought to hold back the tears. I couldn't give her the answer she wanted. I couldn't promise her that everything would be okay when I knew it wouldn't be. Hours passed in a haze of meaningless chatter from nurses and doctors. I kept asking about Ellie, checking if she was okay, if someone had taken care of her. Every time there was that same pause, a slight hesitation, before they assured me she was fine. But I could hear the unspoken truth in their voices. Ellie wasn't fine. She was alone, left behind, just like I had been when I was her age. My heart broke for her all over again. When I finally got my phone back, my hands were shaking. My sister had posted pictures on social media. There she was, smiling, surrounded by friends, holding a drink, and in the background my parents, grinning like they were at some kind of vacation. They were all smiling, enjoying life, while I was here, stuck in a hospital bed, fighting for my daughter's well-being. And Ellie was nowhere to be found. Not even a message. Not a check-in. Nothing. I couldn't breathe as I stared at the photo. My family had chosen to ignore her. They had chosen to turn their backs on us. That's when I realized that the cracks in my family's facade had become too big to ignore. I had been living in a house of lies, pretending that everything was fine. But it wasn't. It never had been. And I was done pretending. I couldn't protect Ellie from this kind of betrayal, but I could protect her from now on. I wasn't going to let my family use us anymore. I put the phone down with shaking hands, the weight of the realization settling in. My life had changed in that moment, and there was no going back. But what hurt the most was that I didn't know if I could ever trust them again. The next day, I was still trying to process everything that had happened. I lay there in the sterile hospital bed, staring at the ceiling, my mind swirling with a mix of anger, hurt, and disbelief. Ellie was somewhere down the hall, probably being cared for by strangers who, at least for now, felt safer than family. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw her face, the one she had worn when my sister walked out on her. That empty look, the one that said, "I don't belong here anymore." I thought about my parents. I thought about the way they'd left me in the hospital without even a second glance, knowing full well that Ellie was waiting for them. They had been so quick to dismiss her. "She's a handful," my mother had said, as if Ellie were just another inconvenience in her life. I remembered how they'd walked out of the ER like nothing had happened, as if I wasn't laying there, struggling to breathe, fighting for my sanity. And my sister? She hadn't even bothered to stay. Not even for Ellie. It wasn't just neglect, it was abandonment. The kind of abandonment that cuts deep, leaving scars that might never fade. I hadn't heard from my parents since they left the hospital, and I wasn't sure I wanted to. Every time I thought about them, I felt my blood pressure rise, a heat in my chest that I couldn't ignore. How could they do this? How could they treat us like we were nothing? I had spent years trying to please them, trying to prove I was good enough, but all they had ever done was make me feel small, like I was the problem. That was when I heard the soft knock on the door, and my heart skipped a beat. My first thought was that it was one of the nurses. But when the door opened, I saw her. Aunt Linda. My aunt, who I hadn't spoken to in years, had just walked into my room like she owned the place. She was older than my mother, always a little quieter, a little more reserved, but somehow she had always made me feel seen. Not like I was just another cog in the machine, but like I mattered. And now, here she was, stepping into my life at a moment I couldn't even comprehend. "Where's Ellie?" she asked, her voice steady, but there was a sharpness to it that I hadn't expected. She didn't ask how I was doing. She didn't ask what had happened. She asked about Ellie. I blinked, a little stunned. "She's with my sister," I said, but even as I said it, I knew it wasn't the truth anymore. The hesitation in my voice gave it away. Aunt Linda didn't buy it. She didn't even wait for me to explain. "The nurse told me she's with strangers," she said quietly, the words hitting me like a punch. "What's going on, Tessa?" I looked at her then, really looked at her, and something inside me snapped. I couldn't hide anymore. I couldn't keep pretending that everything was fine when it wasn't. "My family? They've been treating me like I don't matter," I said, the words tumbling out before I could stop them. "Like Ellie doesn't matter. I've been carrying all of it for years. I kept thinking things would get better, that they'd see me, see Ellie, but they never did. They just walked out, left us here. They didn't care." My voice cracked, and I couldn't stop it. I hadn't realized how much I'd been holding in. Aunt Linda's face softened, but there was no pity in her expression. There was no, "I told you so." She just looked at me, her eyes steady and unblinking. "You don't have to carry it alone," she said, her voice low and firm. "You never did." I felt a tear slip down my cheek, and for the first time in what felt like forever, I didn't wipe it away. I didn't try to hide it. Aunt Linda sat down beside me, her hand finding mine, her grip warm and reassuring. It was the first time in days that I felt like I wasn't alone. "You don't need them to define you. Tessa," she said. "You don't need anyone's approval to be good enough, especially not theirs." Her words were simple, but they hit me like a revelation. I had spent my whole life trying to prove I was enough, trying to earn their love and approval, and it had never been enough. And now I realized that I didn't need it. My phone buzzed on the table beside me, and for a second, I hesitated. It was a message from my mother. "How are you feeling?" I stared at it for a long moment before tapping the screen. I typed, "I'm fine, but Ellie isn't, and I need you to stop pretending that she is." Before I could second-guess myself, I hit send. And just like that, a weight I didn't even know I was carrying lifted off my shoulders. The next few days passed in a haze. I was still stuck in the hospital, the dull ache in my body mixing with a deeper sense of exhaustion I couldn't shake. I spent every moment I could asking about Ellie, checking in on her, trying to make sure she was okay despite the circumstances. But with every conversation, every update from the nurses, I knew deep down that she wasn't just physically safe. She was emotionally alone. The little girl who had once lit up any room she walked into was now the quietest version of herself I'd ever seen. Aunt Linda had become my lifeline during this time. She visited every day, sitting with me in the sterile hospital room, offering quiet comfort. It wasn't the kind of comfort that promised to fix everything or make it all okay, but it was the kind that made me feel like I wasn't completely broken. I knew I had a lot of work to do, for Ellie and for myself, but just knowing that Linda was there gave me the strength to face the reality of what had happened. I wasn't ready to forgive my parents for what they had done, but I was starting to accept the fact that they weren't who I had hoped they were. I kept replaying that moment in the ER when my sister had walked out on Ellie, how her words had cut through the air like a knife. "Ellie's a handful, you know that." It wasn't just cruel, it was an attack on her very worth. And the way my parents had responded, with no care, no concern, they had acted like they had better things to do, as though my daughter was disposable, a nuisance they could leave behind without a second thought. It was hard to shake that image from my mind. Ellie had been so hurt by it, and I couldn't stand the thought of her carrying that wound with her for the rest of her life. She was 5, for God's sake. I had to protect her, not just physically, but emotionally. She deserved so much more than this. The day I finally left the hospital, I felt like a different person. I was no longer the same woman who had walked in, weak, uncertain, and clinging to the hope that my family would come through. I had seen too much, heard too much, and felt too much to go back to that. When I got home, I was relieved to find Ellie sitting at the kitchen table, coloring with Aunt Linda by her side. Her face lit up when she saw me, but there was still a shadow in her eyes, a hesitance that hadn't been there before. I forced a smile and walked over to her, bending down to kiss the top of her head. "Hey, sweetie," I said softly, smoothing her hair back. "How are you feeling?" She didn't answer at first, just stared up at me, her small hands clutching the crayons a little too tightly. "I'm okay," she said finally, but there was an uncertainty in her voice that made my heart twist. She was trying so hard to hold it together, but I could see the cracks that only widened as she realized her family, the people who should have been her rock, had let her down. "Hey," I said, kneeling down to her level, "you're not alone. I'm always here, okay? I'm always going to be here for you." She nodded, her eyes filling with tears she was trying desperately to hold back. And that was when I realized I wasn't just fighting for myself anymore. I wasn't just healing from the hurt I'd experienced. I was fighting for Ellie, for her trust, for her safety, for her future. Aunt Linda watched us from the doorway, and when Ellie looked up at her, Linda gave her a soft smile. "I'm here too," she said gently. "You're not alone, Ellie. You never will be." The words were simple, but they carried so much weight. They were a promise that things would change, that Ellie would be safe from the things my parents had done to us. I couldn't protect her from everything, but I could protect her from the toxicity that had always been a part of my family. As the days passed, the tension began to ease. I had the hard conversations with Ellie, helping her understand what had happened, and slowly, I watched as the light began to return to her eyes. It wasn't instant, but it was real. And I promised myself, as I watched her color quietly at the table, that I would do whatever it took to make sure she never felt abandoned again. No more pretending, no more lies, only truth, only safety, and only love. I didn't know what the future held, but for the first time in a long time, I felt like I was ready to face it. With Ellie by my side and Aunt Linda there to guide us, I knew we could rebuild. And that was all I needed to know. It's been a year since that night in the hospital. A year since I looked at my parents for the last time and realized they would never be the family I had hoped for. It still stings in quiet moments when I think about how easily they walked away from me and Ellie, how they turned their backs without even a second thought. But I've come to realize that I don't need them the way I used to. I don't need their approval, their love, or their false sense of support. What I needed was something real, something that could withstand the weight of the truth. And that's where Aunt Linda comes in. She's been our rock, the steady presence in our lives that I never knew we needed. She showed up when everything felt like it was falling apart, and she never once looked back. Her quiet strength and unwavering support gave me the courage to stand up for myself and Ellie in ways I never thought I could. With her help, I started to see things more clearly. I stopped seeing myself as the problem, the one who wasn't good enough. I started seeing myself as someone worthy of love, someone who deserved respect. I had cut off all contact with my parents after everything came to light. It wasn't out of malice, but out of necessity. I couldn't keep allowing them to walk all over me, to ignore the pain they had caused. And yet, despite the anger, despite the betrayal, part of me still wanted to believe that they could change. I wanted them to come to their senses and realize the hurt they had caused. But they never did. They never even tried. And in the end, that made it easier to keep them out of my life. Life has been quieter, but not necessarily easier. There have been moments when I've doubted myself, when I've wondered if I made the right choice. There have been days when I've second-guessed my decision to go no contact, to build my life without them. But then I look at Ellie, and I see the difference in her. She's still my sweet, sensitive girl, but there's a newfound confidence in her now. She's starting to understand that she's not just okay, she's enough. She's always been enough. And that, above everything else, has been the most important thing for me to teach her. Aunt Linda has been incredible with Ellie. She's not just the aunt who visits on holidays, she's the one who listens, who encourages, who makes Ellie feel like she matters. When Ellie asks about her grandparents, Linda always responds with kindness, but never with the empty promises my parents would make. You're important, Ellie. You're loved, and that's all that matters. It's the kind of message I wish my parents had sent all those years, but I'm glad that Ellie now has someone who doesn't just talk the talk, but walks the walk. It hasn't been easy, but it's been worth it. I've learned to lean on people who truly care, people who see me, not as a burden, not as a problem, but as someone who deserves love, respect, and space to breathe. I've learned that sometimes the family we're born into isn't the family we need, and that's okay. We build our own families along the way, the people who lift us up when we fall, who show up when we need them the most. I still carry the hurt, the disappointment, the lingering pain of being abandoned by the people I thought would always be there for me. But with each passing day, that pain grows smaller. It's there, but it doesn't define me anymore. What defines me is the love I have for Ellie, the love Linda has shown us, and the life we've built together, a life where we are enough, exactly as we are. And when I think about the future, it doesn't feel uncertain anymore. It feels like something I can handle. It feels like something I can protect, because no matter what happens, I'll always have Ellie. And with her by my side, I know we'll be okay. More than okay, we'll be strong. I never imagined it would feel like this, peaceful, steady, and most surprisingly, hopeful. But here I am, a year after everything fell apart, and things are finally starting to feel like they could be okay. I still carry the weight of the past, but it's lighter now. It's like the heaviness that once pressed down on my chest has slowly begun to lift. Not because the hurt has disappeared, but because I've learned how to carry it without letting it crush me. Ellie has blossomed in ways I didn't think possible. She's still my little girl, still sensitive, still full of questions and wonder, but there's a confidence in her now that wasn't there before. She speaks her mind more freely, and she no longer second-guesses herself. She's beginning to understand that she doesn't need anyone's approval to be valuable. That's something I've been trying to teach her, something I'm still trying to teach myself. But when I look at her, I see how far she's come, and I know that I'm doing something right. I've never been more proud of her. I've learned to be more honest with myself, too. I've stopped pretending that everything's fine when it's not. I've stopped hiding from the parts of myself I don't like. For years, I tried to ignore the fact that I was giving more than I was receiving, that I was clinging to a family that didn't know how to love me the way I needed. I spent so much time trying to fill the gaps, trying to make things work, trying to make them proud, but all it did was drain me. It wasn't until I let go of that illusion that I was able to breathe again. Aunt Linda has been a guiding light through all of this. She's not the kind of person who offers empty words or shallow comfort. She's steady, no nonsense, and incredibly loving, but never in a way that makes you feel like you owe her anything. She just is. She's always been there when I've needed her, and now, with Ellie, she's showing up in ways I never expected. Linda's been a rock for both of us, and I can see the way Ellie's starting to look at her. She admires her, she listens to her, and in a way, Linda has become the family I needed when my own couldn't step up. I know it hasn't been easy for Linda, either. She's been an outsider in a lot of ways, removed from the chaos of our family for years, yet she never hesitated to step in when we needed her most. She didn't just show up at the hospital, she showed up in my life, in Ellie's life, and never asked for anything in return. It's a lesson I'm still learning, the lesson of unconditional love, not from obligation, but from choice. The days with Ellie are no longer filled with constant worry. I still make mistakes, of course. I still have my moments of doubt when I wonder if I'm doing the right thing. But those moments are fleeting now, replaced with a stronger sense of self. I'm no longer running on empty, no longer allowing others to drain me of everything I have. And that means I'm finally able to give Ellie the mother she deserves, the one who's present, who listens, and who isn't consumed by the need to fix things for everyone else. I've made peace with my parents, not because I've forgiven them, but because I've realized that holding on to that anger doesn't serve me anymore. It's not about them, it's about me. It's about choosing to move forward, to stop letting their actions dictate my happiness. It's about knowing that I'm not defined by the people who have walked out of my life, but by the ones who have stayed. And in that, I've found freedom. Ellie and I are building our own story now, one that's not shaped by past wounds, but by new possibilities. And for the first time in a long time, I'm excited for what comes next. Not because everything is perfect, but because I finally believe that we're capable of handling whatever comes our way. We've survived the hardest parts, and now it's time to live, to thrive. And I can't wait to see what that looks like for both of us. It's funny how life works, isn't it? One minute, everything feels impossible, like you're drowning in the weight of other people's expectations and your own fears. The next minute, you're standing on the other side of it all, not with all the answers, but with a sense of peace that you never thought you'd have. That's where I am now, standing on the other side of a storm I thought would break me. But instead, it taught me how to stand taller. The pain of what happened with my parents still lingers in the background, but it doesn't consume me anymore. The bitterness, the anger, the resentment, they're all there, sure, but they're not the first things I wake up to anymore. What I wake up to now is Ellie. I wake up to her energy, her laugh, her never-ending curiosity. I wake up to the small, quiet moments where she curls up next to me with a book or tells me about her day. And that's enough. That's more than enough. Ellie has taught me so much. She's shown me how to find joy in the little things, how to let go of the past, and just be in the present. I used to live my life waiting for the other shoe to drop, constantly preparing for the next disaster. But now, I'm learning to embrace the unpredictability. I'm learning to trust that no matter what happens, we'll be okay because we have each other. We don't need anyone else to validate our worth. We've got this. I've started to let myself heal in ways I didn't think were possible. The constant pressure I used to feel to fix everything, to make everything right for everyone else, has slowly faded. It's not that I don't care. It's that I've realized I can't pour from an empty cup. I've stopped letting people take more than I have to give. I've learned that my well-being matters. And if people can't respect that, then they don't get a place in my life. Aunt Linda has been a huge part of that shift. She's shown me what unconditional love looks like. Not the kind that expects anything in return. Not the kind that keeps score. But the kind that's there for you, day in and day out, no matter how messy things get. I've always admired her quiet strength, her ability to remain calm in the midst of chaos. But now, I see how much strength it takes to love without expectation, to give without needing anything back. And I'm starting to understand what it means to live that way, too. Life with Ellie is more than just surviving now. It's thriving. It's watching her grow into someone who knows her worth, who understands that love isn't conditional, and that she doesn't have to earn it from anyone. She's starting to ask questions about the past, about her grandparents, and instead of avoiding it or lying to protect her, I'm telling her the truth. I'm telling her that not everyone who should love us does. And that's okay, because love comes in many forms, and it doesn't always come from the people you expect. Some days, I still feel the sting of what my parents did, the betrayal, the abandonment. It's hard to shake that kind of hurt, especially when it's been a lifetime in the making. But I've realized that I don't need their approval anymore. I don't need their love to feel complete. I am enough, just as I am, and so is Ellie. I don't know what the future holds, but for the first time in a long time, I'm not afraid of it. Because no matter what comes our way, we're ready. We've got each other, and that's all we need. Everything else will fall into place, and that's a piece I never thought I'd find. But now, I know I can. Life's messy, and sometimes people disappoint you in ways you never saw coming. But here's the key. Don't let anyone's bad behavior define your worth. Stand tall, protect your peace, and surround yourself with people who actually show up for you. You've got this. And if you're in the mood for more tips on handling life's chaos or how to take the high road in style, hit subscribe on the Revenge Protocol YouTube channel. Seriously, leave a comment while you're at it. Because let's face it, we all love a good revenge plot with a happy ending.